Julian let out a frustrated sigh, the picture frame slipping in his grasp for the fifth time. His living room was a cheerful mess, sunlight streaming through the window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air, and a stack of books precariously balanced on a bright yellow ottoman. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the coffee table, a testament to his earlier, more relaxed morning. Now, however, relaxation was a distant memory. This particular frame, a lovely watercolor of a sunset he'd picked up at a small art fair, was proving to be his nemesis. He'd tried everything. The tiny nail he'd hammered in, a little crooked, he admitted, just wasn't cooperating. The wire on the back of the frame seemed determined to slide off, no matter how many times he adjusted it. He even tried holding it with one hand and hammering with the other, a maneuver that nearly resulted in a bruised thumb and a slightly larger, less intentional hole in the wall. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, and he pushed a strand of brown hair out of his eyes with the back of his hand. "Come on, you," he muttered, glaring at the offending frame. It wasn't even a heavy piece, just a simple wooden frame with a glass front. Yet, it behaved as if it were carved from lead and possessed a stubborn will of its own. He imagined it mocking him, a tiny, silent chuckle emanating from its corners. The wall, a pristine pale blue, now bore several small indentations from his various attempts. He took a deep breath, ready for another round in his battle against inanimate objects. He just wanted it to hang straight, perfectly centered above his favorite armchair, completing the cozy nook he envisioned. It seemed like such a simple task, yet it was turning into an epic saga of domestic struggle. Just as Julian prepared for another assault on the unyielding wall, a voice drifted from outside. "Everything okay over there, Julian?" Julian jumped, nearly dropping the frame again. He turned towards his open balcony doors, where his neighbor, Marcus, was leaning casually over the railing of his own apartment balcony, a friendly smile lighting up his face. Marcus was wearing a soft gray t-shirt that showed off his strong arms, and his dark hair was a little messy, as if he'd just woken up or been running his hands through it. He held a steaming mug, and the smell of coffee wafted faintly across the small space between their buildings. "Oh, hey, Marcus," Julian replied, a flush creeping up his neck. He felt a bit silly being caught mid-wrestle with a picture frame. "Yeah, just battling a particularly stubborn piece of art." He gestured vaguely at the offending object, which now leaned precariously against the wall, daring him to try again. Marcus chuckled, a warm, low sound that carried easily. "Looks like a tough fight. Need an extra pair of hands, or maybe just a less clumsy one." His smile widened, and Julian found himself smiling back, despite his annoyance with the frame. Marcus had moved in about 6 months ago, and they'd exchanged pleasantries over mailboxes and in the elevator, but this was the most interaction they'd had. "Honestly, I might take you up on that," Julian admitted, feeling a bit of his frustration melt away at the offer. "This thing is winning, and my wall is starting to look like a target practice board." He glanced at the small, accidental holes. Marcus pushed off his railing, his mug still in hand. "Give me 2 minutes. I'll be right over. Pretty sure I have a level in my toolbox, too, which might help." He winked, and then disappeared from view, leaving Julian with a surprising sense of relief and a tiny flutter in his chest. Help was on the way. Julian quickly tidied a few things, kicking stray magazines under the coffee table and nudging his half-eaten cereal bowl onto a less obvious spot on the counter. He felt a silly urge to make his apartment look less like a battleground and more like, well, a normal home. Before he could do much more, there was a soft knock at his door. He opened it to find Marcus standing there, now holding a small, red toolbox in one hand and his coffee mug in the other. His smile was as friendly as before, and Julian felt a little less embarrassed. "Hey," Julian said, stepping aside. "Come on in." Marcus walked into the living room, his eyes scanning the space. He took in a slightly askew picture frame leaning against the wall, the tiny holes, and Julian's flushed face. "Looks like you really gave it a good try," Marcus commented, his tone kind, not at all mocking. He set his toolbox down gently on the floor near the wall. Julian shrugged, a small laugh escaping him. "Yeah, My patience for home improvement projects runs out pretty fast, especially when they fight back. He pointed to a small dent in the wall. That was a close call for my thumb. Marcus knelt, opening his toolbox with a soft click. He pulled out a small, yellow level and a measuring tape. Don't worry, we'll get this sorted. It's usually easier with 2 sets of eyes and the right tools. He glanced up at Julian, his eyes twinkling, and maybe a bit less enthusiastic hammering. Julian grinned, feeling the last vestiges of his embarrassment fade away. It was nice to have someone else here, especially someone so calm and capable. He watched as Marcus began to assess the wall, measuring the space above the armchair. The apartment, which had felt a bit lonely during his struggle, now felt warmer, more alive with Marcus's presence. Julian picked up the picture frame again, ready to follow instructions, feeling a new sense of hope for his sunset watercolor. Marcus, with a practiced eye, found the ideal spot. He marked a small X on the wall with a pencil, then pulled a shiny new nail and a sturdy hammer from his toolbox. Okay, hold this for me, just above the mark, he instructed, handing Julian the picture frame. Julian held the frame steady, watching Marcus. There was a quiet confidence in the way Marcus handled the tools, a stark contrast to Julian's own fumbling attempts. Marcus tapped the nail gently to get it started, then with a few swift, precise blows, drove it into the wall. Each tap was firm and sure, unlike Julian's hesitant, glancing strikes. The sound echoed softly in the apartment, a satisfying rhythm. All right, try hanging it now, Marcus said, stepping back and offering the hammer to Julian, who took it automatically. Julian carefully lifted the frame, aligning the wire with the freshly hammered nail. It slid into place with a soft click, hanging almost perfectly straight. He stepped back, a grin spreading across his face. Wow, he breathed, genuinely impressed. You make that look so easy, Marcus chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It's all about the angle and not rushing it. Plus, having a level helps. He pulled out the yellow level, holding it against the top of the frame. The tiny bubble floated right in the middle, showing it was almost perfectly even. See? Just a tiny bit off. Nothing a small adjustment can't fix. Julian looked at the frame, then back at Marcus. The watercolor sunset now looked like it belonged, no longer a source of frustration, but a beautiful addition to his wall. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Marcus had made quick work of what Julian had spent 20 minutes struggling with. The frame wasn't quite perfect, but it was closer than Julian had ever managed on his own. Just a little nudge, Julian murmured, examining the frame from different angles. He was a stickler for details, and that tiny tilt, barely noticeable to anyone else, bugged him. I think if I just push the bottom right corner up a hair, it'll be perfect. He looked around for something to stand on. His sturdy kitchen step stool was, of course, tucked away in the pantry, a room he didn't feel like venturing into right now. His eyes landed on a small, decorative wooden chair in the corner of the living room, usually used for stacking books. It wasn't the most stable thing with slender legs and a slightly uneven seat, but it was close. I'll just use this, Julian said, pulling the chair forward. He placed it carefully on the rug beneath the picture. Marcus, who had been putting his tools back into his red box, looked up. Are you sure about that chair? It looks a bit delicate. He eyed the spindly legs with a hint of concern. Julian waved a dismissive hand. Nah, it'll be fine. I just need to reach the top. It's not like I'm doing acrobatics. He carefully stepped onto the chair, his feet finding purchase on the padded seat. The chair creaked a little under his weight, and one of the legs wobbled slightly. He stretched his arm upwards, his fingers brushing the bottom edge of the frame. Whoa, okay. Maybe a little more delicate than I thought, Julian mumbled, feeling the chair sway. He leaned forward, trying to get a better grip on the frame to adjust its tilt. His balance fell off, and he suddenly regretted not getting the proper step stool. The frame was within reach, but the chair beneath him felt less like a stable platform and more like a springboard about to give way. He focused intently on the picture, trying to ignore the wobble. Julian stretched a little further, his fingertips finally finding the bottom edge of the frame. He tried to nudge it up, but the wobbly chair chose that exact moment to give a more pronounced lurch. His arms flailed a little, and a small gasp escaped him. He was definitely going to fall. Before he could even register the thought, a strong, warm hand landed firmly on each of his hips. Marcus, who had been watching with a wary eye, had moved without a second thought. His grip was steady and sure, instantly stopping Julian's precarious sway. Julian felt himself instantly anchored, the fear of falling replaced by a surprising rush of warmth. He froze, his hands still hovering near the picture frame, but his attention completely shifted. Marcus's hands were large and warm, pressing against the thin fabric of Julian's t-shirt. The unexpected contact sent a jolt through Julian, a feeling that had nothing to do with nearly toppling off a chair. He could feel the solid strength of Marcus behind him, the warmth radiating through his clothes. Neither of them moved. Julian stood on the wobbly chair, his body suddenly very aware of the hands on his hips. Marcus remained exactly where he was, his hands a comforting, steadying presence. The air in the room, which had been filled with Julian's frustrated sighs and the tap of Marcus's hammer, now held a different kind of quiet. It was thick with unspoken things, with the sudden, unexpected closeness between them. Julian's heart beat a little faster, a soft drum against his ribs. The picture frame, forgotten for a moment, hung there almost perfectly straight. The silence stretched, not awkward, but rather soft and warm, like a cozy blanket settling over them. Julian could feel the slight thrum of Marcus's fingers against his hips, a gentle pressure that wasn't letting go. He felt completely steady now, not just physically, but in a deeper, more unexpected way. He could feel Marcus's breath, faint and warm, near his ear. He didn't move. He didn't want to. The moment felt too fragile, too new to disturb. He was acutely aware of every sensation. The rough texture of his t-shirt under Marcus's hands, the faint scent of coffee and something clean, like fresh laundry, that clung to Marcus. His own heart continued its quick, soft rhythm, a secret drum in the quiet room. Marcus, too, seemed content to stay. His grip remained firm, a comforting weight. He could feel the slight shift of Julian's weight on the wobbly chair, the warmth of Julian's body. It was a simple, everyday act of helping, but the stillness that followed was anything but ordinary. It was a pause in time, a breath held, where the world outside Julian's cheerful apartment faded away. Julian finally risked a small glance over his shoulder, turning his head just enough to catch Marcus's eye. Marcus was looking at him, his expression soft, a faint smile playing on his lips. His dark eyes held a kindness that made Julian's stomach do a funny flip. In that shared gaze, a new kind of understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of something more than just a neighborly assist. The simple touch lingered, creating a bubble of unexpected intimacy in the bright, sunny living room. Julian felt a strange mix of shyness and curiosity, wondering what this quiet moment truly meant. Julian couldn't hold back the feeling bubbling up inside him any longer. A soft giggle escaped his lips, a small, breathy sound that broke the gentle spell. He turned his head a little more, meeting Marcus's gaze properly this time, a playful glint dancing in his eyes. "Well, you're quite the lifesaver, aren't you?" Julian teased, his voice a little shaky, but full of amusement. "Excellent spotting skills. Are you like a secret gymnastics coach on the side?" He tried to keep his tone light, hoping to ease the sudden intensity that had settled between them. The warmth of Marcus's hands was still very much there, a persistent reminder of their unexpected closeness. Marcus's lips twitched, a slow smile spreading across his face, and Julian noticed a faint blush creeping up Marcus's neck. "Just a concerned neighbor," Marcus replied, his voice a low rumble. His eyes held a gentle humor that matched Julian's own. "Wouldn't want my new friend to take a tumble while trying to perfect his art display." Julian laughed then, a genuine, bubbling sound that made the room feel lighter. "My hero," he exclaimed, playfully exaggerating the words. He gently tried to wiggle the picture frame one last time, careful not to disturb Marcus's hold too much. "You know, for someone who doesn't seem to do much beyond drinking coffee on his balcony, you're surprisingly handy." Marcus laughed too, a richer sound this time, and Julian felt the vibrations subtly through his hips. "Hey now, I have many hidden talents," Marcus said, his grip still firm, but with a hint of playful squeezing. "You just haven't seen them all yet. For example, I also make a mean batch of cookies." The teasing felt good, a comfortable banter that helped bridge the gap between their silent moment and the everyday world. But beneath the jokes, Julian could still feel that soft hum of connection, the lingering warmth that Marcus's touch had left behind. Marcus's grin broadened, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. The faint blush on his cheeks deepened just a shade, making him look a little shy and very charming. He didn't let go of Julian's hips right away, but the playful squeeze he'd given earlier was gone, replaced by a simple, steady hold. Julian found himself laughing again, a light, happy sound that echoed Marcus's deeper chuckle. The sudden tension that had sprung up between them, the quiet intensity of their shared gaze, seemed to soften and melt away with each burst of laughter. It was replaced by a comfortable, easy-going feeling, like two old friends sharing a joke. "Cookies, huh?" Julian said, still smiling. "Are we talking chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, or something fancy?" He finally managed to give the picture frame the tiniest upward nudge on the right side. He stepped back a fraction, and Marcus's hands moved with him, still providing that solid anchor. "All of the above, if you're lucky," Marcus replied, his voice still warm with amusement. "I dabble. And look at that. A perfect sunset." He let go of Julian's hips, the sudden absence of his hands, leaving a cool ghost of warmth behind. Julian carefully stepped down from the wobbly chair, his feet landing firmly on the rug. He turned to face Marcus, feeling a little lighter, a little happier. The picture was indeed perfectly straight now, and the small victory felt bigger than it should have, thanks to the company. "You know, you're pretty good at this neighbor thing," Julian said, picking up the chair and returning it to its corner. "Maybe I should start having more trouble with my frames." He winked, a playful challenge in his eyes. The easy laughter had truly worked its magic, transforming the charged silence into a cheerful atmosphere. "Careful what you wish for," Marcus said with a grin, picking up his toolbox. "I might just show up with cookies every time you're wrestling with a curtain rod." Julian laughed, but as his gaze lingered on Marcus's face, the laughter faded into a softer smile. Marcus was looking back at him, and for a moment, the playful glint in their eyes shifted. The easygoing atmosphere that had just settled seemed to waver, and a subtle new tension began to weave its way in. It wasn't an unpleasant tension, but a different kind of quiet. Their eyes met and held. Julian felt a strange mix of warmth and uncertainty. It was the kind of moment where you suddenly realize the air around you is charged with something unspoken. The domestic task was done, the immediate problem solved, but something else had begun. Marcus's smile softened further, a hint of something deeper in his dark eyes. He didn't look away, and neither did Julian. The casual friendliness that had marked their interaction until now seemed to recede, replaced by a quiet question hanging between them. Julian's heart gave a little thump against his ribs. He wondered if Marcus felt it too, this subtle shift, this almost awkwardness that felt surprisingly nice. He thought about the feel of Marcus's hands on his hips, the solid warmth, the unexpected sense of being held. It had been just a moment, a quick save from a fall, but it had left a mark, a feeling of connection that went beyond mere neighborly assistance. The cheerful mess of Julian's apartment, the freshly hung picture, all seemed to fade into the background as their eyes remained locked. It was no longer just about a picture frame. It was about the two of them standing in the sunlight, realizing something new. The quiet question in the air wasn't spoken, but it hummed between them, warm and insistent. Julian felt a new kind of heat spreading through his chest, different from the flush of embarrassment or the rush of nearly falling. This was a deeper warmth, a soft glow that settled in his core. It felt like something sweet and hopeful, a feeling he hadn't expected to encounter while hanging a picture frame. He recognized it. It wasn't just gratitude for Marcus's help, though he was certainly thankful. It wasn't just the pleasantness of having company, though Marcus was definitely good company. This was something else entirely, a spark that had been lit by the touch, by the lingering gaze, by the shared laughter that had covered a deeper, more thrilling nervousness. It was the undeniable pull of attraction, a quiet recognition that this man, Marcus, standing before him, made his heart beat a little differently. Julian felt a slight tremble in his hands, a nervous energy that was also oddly exciting. He found himself studying Marcus's face more closely, the gentle curve of his lips, the way his dark hair fell, just so, the kindness in his eyes that now held a hint of something more. He wondered if his own face betrayed the sudden rush of feelings. He hoped not entirely, but maybe just enough. This feeling, this soft, blossoming warmth, went beyond the simple neighborly gesture. It was an invitation, a silent question about what could be. The domesticity of the moment, the picture on the wall, the toolbox on the floor, had given way to something far more personal and, in its own way, profound. Julian felt a smile try to break through, a shy, hopeful smile that mirrored the one he'd seen on Marcus's face earlier. Marcus watched Julian, his own heart doing a funny little flip in his chest. He'd initially just wanted to be a good neighbor, to offer a quick fix to a common household problem. But when his hands had instinctively reached out to steady Julian, and that quiet, unexpected moment had stretched between them, something had shifted. He'd felt the warmth of Julian's body through the thin fabric, the surprising softness of his hips, and a jolt had gone through him, a feeling far stronger than simple concern. The playful teasing that followed had been a welcome release, a way to break the intense silence, but it hadn't erased the feeling. In fact, it had only made it clearer. Now, as Julian looked at him, his eyes wide and a little shy, Marcus felt a surprising pull. It was a recognition, deep and undeniable, of an attraction he hadn't expected. Julian's bright apartment, his cheerful mess, his quick wit, and that charmingly flushed face when he was flustered. It all suddenly looked different, more appealing. The way Julian's giggles had turned into genuine laughter, the way his eyes danced when he teased, it all settled in Marcus's mind, painting a picture that was much more vivid than any watercolor. He realized his own smile had softened, mirroring Julian's. There was a quiet hum in the air, a silent conversation passing between their locked gazes. This wasn't just about fixing a frame. It was about discovering a connection, a spark that had flared up in the most ordinary of circumstances. He felt a gentle warmth spread through him, a feeling of possibility that made him want to linger, to learn more about the man in front of him. This wasn't just neighborly kindness anymore. This was something new, something exciting, and Marcus felt a quiet thrill at the thought. The unspoken hum between them grew stronger, a silent, understanding passing between their eyes. Julian knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his heart, that this simple act of hanging a picture frame had changed things. It wasn't just a neighbor helping a neighbor anymore. The easy smiles, the shared laughter, the comforting touch, they had all woven together to create a new thread between them. Marcus, too, felt it. The air felt different, charged with a subtle energy that had nothing to do with hammers or nails. He looked at Julian, seeing not just the guy who lived next door, but someone whose presence now sparked a surprising warmth and interest. He knew, without a single word being spoken, that the line between casual acquaintance and something more significant had been crossed. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic pronouncements. The realization was quiet, soft, and completely real. A small, everyday domestic task had turned into a moment of unexpected intimacy, leaving both of them with a feeling of gentle wonder. It was a pleasant discovery, a new door quietly opening. Julian cleared his throat softly, still holding Marcus's gaze. "Well," he said, his voice a little softer than before. "Thanks again, Marcus, for everything." He didn't just mean the frame. Marcus's smile was kind, a touch of that shy blush still on his cheeks. "Anytime, Julian. Seriously, glad I could help." He nodded towards the perfectly hung picture. "Looks great." His eyes, however, were still on Julian's face, holding that silent question, that shared recognition. They both understood that the help had gone far beyond just a picture frame. Marcus finally broke their gaze, a soft, lingering smile on his face. He bent down to pick up his toolbox, the red metal gleaming in the sunlight. "All right," he said, his voice a little huskier than before. "My work here is done. Unless, of course, you have any more wobbly chairs that need spotting." He winked, a playful return to their earlier banter, but the underlying warmth in his eyes remained. Julian laughed, a light, happy sound. "Not today. I think I've reached my quota for near-death experiences by picture frame." He walked over to the freshly hung watercolor, admiring it from small distance. The sunset scene looked perfect, finally settled on his wall, a burst of warm colors against the pale blue. It was exactly how he'd imagined it. But as he looked at the picture, his thoughts were less on the painted sky and more on the man standing beside him. The frame was indeed straight, a small victory achieved. Yet, the real picture, the one that truly captured his attention, was the unspoken connection now hanging in the air between him and Marcus. It was an invisible thread, spun from shared laughter, a moment of unexpected touch, and the silent recognition of attraction. Marcus stood by the door, his hand on the knob, but he didn't open it right away. He looked at Julian, then at the picture, then back at Julian. "Well," he said, a gentle invitation in his tone, "if you ever get around to those cookies, you know where to find me." Julian's smile widened, a genuine, hopeful curve of his lips. "I'll keep that in mind," he promised, his eyes sparkling. The apartment felt different now, no longer just a place where he struggled alone, but a space that held the promise of something new. The picture frame was just a frame, but the feeling it had brought into his home, the connection it had forged, felt like the beginning of a much bigger, more beautiful story.